the world may be witnessing the beginning of a dangerous new conflict. Ballistic missiles launched, warships sunk, and military bases under attack, tensions between Iran, Israel, and the United States are rapidly escalating. Is this just another regional clash, or the start of something much bigger? Global tensions in the Middle East have reached one of the most dangerous moments in decades as the confrontation involving Iran. Israel and the United States escalates from shadow conflict into direct military confrontation. What began as indirect pressure, proxy clashes, and covert operations has now evolved into open attacks involving missiles, airstrikes, naval warfare, and regional militias. For many observers, this situation represents one of the most serious geopolitical flashpoints of the modern era. The Middle East has long been one of the most strategically sensitive regions on Earth. It sits at the center of global energy production, major trade routes, and competing political alliances. When military conflict erupts here, the consequences rarely stay local. Markets, security policies, and international alliances around the world often react almost immediately. The latest escalation reportedly began when Iran launched a long-range ballistic missile known as the Khorramshahr-4 toward Israeli territory. The Khorramshahr missile family is considered one of Iran's most powerful strategic weapons, capable of carrying an extremely heavy payload across long distances. Reports suggested the missile carried a warhead weighing close to 1 ton. According to sources circulating online and in regional media, the missile targeted key Israeli infrastructure, including Ben Gurion Airport, the country's main international airport. Ben Gurion Airport is not only a major civilian travel hub, but also a strategic logistics gateway for Israel's military and emergency operations. Because of its importance, the airport is considered one of the most heavily defended locations in the country. Iranian sources claim that the missile was able to penetrate Israel's layered air defense network. Israel operates one of the most advanced missile defense systems in the world, designed to intercept incoming rockets, drones, and ballistic missiles at multiple altitudes. However, even the most advanced defense systems can face serious pressure when multiple projectiles are launched simultaneously or when new missile technologies are introduced. If the claim that a missile successfully penetrated Israel's defenses is accurate, it could represent a major development in regional military dynamics. Such an event could force defense planners across the region to reassess their security strategies. Shortly after the missile strike, Israel reportedly launched a series of retaliatory air operations targeting locations inside Iran. These operations were reportedly supported by the United States as part of a coordinated military response. Airstrikes were reported in several locations, including the Iranian capital, Tehran. Additional attacks were also reported in other regions, such as Loristan province, where several facilities suspected of military activity were allegedly targeted. Military analysts believe these strikes were intended to weaken Iran's missile infrastructure and reduce its ability to launch further attacks. However, as with many large-scale military operations, reports also emerged suggesting that civilian areas may have been affected by the bombing. In modern warfare, especially when battles occur near major cities, separating military targets from civilian infrastructure can become extremely difficult. Local reports claimed that residential buildings in parts of Tehran were damaged during the strikes. The human cost of the conflict is already becoming a major concern. Early reports suggested that the death toll could exceed 1,000 people after only several days of fighting. While exact numbers are difficult to verify during active conflict, such figures highlight the severity of the situation. Beyond the loss of life, damage to infrastructure is another major consequence of modern warfare. Power grids, hospitals, transportation networks, and housing can all be disrupted during large military operations. When these systems collapse, millions of civilians can quickly face shortages of food, medicine, and basic services. At the same time, the conflict has begun to affect global energy infrastructure. A major fire was reported at the Fujairah Oil Refinery in the United Arab Emirates. The incident was reportedly caused by debris from a drone intercepted by air defenses that fell near the facility. Fujairah is one of the most important oil storage and shipping hubs in the Persian Gulf region. Large numbers of international oil tankers pass through the area every year. Because of this strategic role, any disruption at Fujairah can immediately trigger concerns in global energy markets. Historically, Oil prices often react sharply to military escalation in the Middle East. Even small disruptions can create fears of larger supply shortages. In addition to air and missile warfare, the conflict has also spread to naval operations. One of the most dramatic developments involved the reported sinking of an Iranian naval vessel. The warship Dena was reportedly struck by a torpedo fired from a U.S. submarine. The incident allegedly occurred in waters near Sri Lanka. If confirmed, this would represent one of the most direct naval confrontations between Iranian and American forces in recent years. Rescue operations reportedly recovered dozens of bodies from the wreckage of the ship. Several sailors were also reported missing after the incident. Events like this illustrate how quickly a regional conflict can spread into international waters. Naval routes in the Indian Ocean are some of the most heavily used shipping lanes in the world. Any military confrontation in these waters raises concerns about the safety of global trade. Meanwhile, tensions are also rising in Iraq, where armed groups aligned with Iran reportedly launched rockets and drones toward a U.S. military base in Erbil. These attacks were described as retaliation for the death of Iran's supreme leader Ali Khamenei. If confirmed, the death of such a powerful figure could dramatically reshape Iran's political landscape. As supreme leader, Khamenei has held ultimate authority over Iran's military, intelligence agencies, and foreign policy. His influence has shaped Iran's strategic posture for decades. A sudden leadership vacuum at that level could lead to internal political struggles or shifts in national strategy. On the diplomatic front, the United States has also taken controversial policy steps. President Donald Trump announced a travel restriction affecting citizens from multiple countries. The policy reportedly includes nations such as Iran, Yemen, Afghanistan, and several African states. U.S. officials described the measure as a national security precaution during a period of heightened global tensions. However, critics argue that the move could worsen diplomatic relations and fuel anti-American sentiment in parts of the world. The broader conflict between Iran and Israel has deep historical roots. Relations between the two countries deteriorated sharply after the Iranian Revolution of 1979. Since then, the two states have engaged in a long series of indirect confrontations. These include cyber attacks, covert operations, intelligence activities, and proxy conflicts across the Middle East. The United States has long been deeply involved in this geopolitical rivalry. Washington maintains one of its closest alliances with Israel, while also viewing Iran as a major strategic adversary. For decades, disputes between Washington and Tehran have centered on Iran's nuclear program, regional influence, and support for armed groups. When powerful nations confront each other in such a strategic region, the ripple effects can extend across the entire international system. Energy markets, military alliances, and diplomatic relationships can all shift rapidly. Some analysts warn that continued escalation could draw additional countries into the conflict. The Middle East contains a complex web of security partnerships and rivalries. If one major power becomes deeply involved in combat, allied states may feel pressure to take sides. This is one reason why many governments around the world are closely monitoring the situation. Global powers such as Russia and China also have economic and strategic interests in the region. Any prolonged instability could affect international trade routes, energy supplies, and political alignments. Security experts often note that large wars rarely begin with a single decisive event. Instead, they emerge through a series of escalating confrontations that gradually spiral out of control. Each retaliation leads to another, creating a cycle that becomes increasingly difficult to stop. At this stage, diplomacy remains one of the few tools capable of slowing escalation. However, diplomatic efforts become much harder once casualties mount, and public pressure intensifies on all sides. Mutual distrust between governments can make negotiations extremely complicated. Meanwhile, civilians often pay the highest price during armed conflict. Families lose homes, businesses collapse, and entire communities are displaced by violence. Economic disruptions can spread far beyond the battlefield. When major infrastructure is damaged, rebuilding can take years. If tensions between Iran, Israel, and the United States continue to escalate, the world could be witnessing the early stages of a major geopolitical transformation. The stability of the Middle East has always played a critical role in global economic and security systems. For that reason, leaders across the world are watching developments extremely carefully. The key question now is whether diplomacy can still prevent a wider war. Because once missiles, submarines, and fighter jets dominate the conversation between nations, the path back to peace becomes far more difficult. And as the situation continues to evolve, the world is left wondering whether this conflict will stabilize or become the spark for something much larger.